Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw yet again Wakanda Forever take the domination at the box office to another level, now surpassing the box office of Thor Love and Thunder and getting very close to passing, probably within the next day or two actually, the box office for The Batman, which is right now in the top 5 highest grossing films of 2022. So the film is still doing well. I know that there are still a lot of people in the comments section and across YouTubeverse who think that the film is a flop or is not doing as well as it is, but I'm just here to say that based on the numbers that are being reported, based on the numbers that we actually have, and based off of the typical standards that which we go by, the film is said to be about $100 million in the black and make a decent amount of profit. However, what also can be true is that this film is still going to be far less than the $1.3 billion that was made by its predecessor. And not only does that show a high difference in the amount of money the film has made, but also if you remember that the average ticket price today is a lot higher than the average ticket price back when the first film came out, not only does it show a loss of money, it shows a massive loss in audience as well. And I think that all of those things showcase that though the individual film is doing well, the individual film is a, quote, success, the overall franchise is still in a bit of hot water, still in a bit of trouble, because this is a movie that should have had a much larger domestic number than it ended up actually having, and it has a major and showcases a major international breakdown that the MCU films have really not been able to crack so far this year, or at the very least not on a very consistent basis. So we'll talk about this. We'll also talk about the second weekend numbers for Violent Night, and how that film is set to make money. But all of this, of course, is in preparation for now, next weekend when we have the release of Avatar 2, The Way of Water. As you all know, I'm so excited, so excited to be covering that movie because I want to see that movie so bad. Hopefully you catch the heavy sarcasm there, but that film is, even though I think the film's going to be trash, especially based off the reviews that I've been hearing so far, even though I think that's going to happen, I do ultimately think as well that the film is going to be a massive box office juggernaut and likely will be the highest grossing film of the year, even surpassing that of the almost $1.5 billion made by Top Gun Maverick. Sorry, my mind is just all over the place because baby Thor has been a little sick today, and I'm all alone doing the stay-at-home dad over the weekend with the lady Freya out of town. So my mind is just crazy. But anyway, before we go any further, though, please make sure you smash the like button, like the fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button as well. It really does help and does mean a lot. Make sure also that you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the live on the channel. This is how broken my brain is today. Anyway, blessed Gaudete Sunday, everybody. This is why I'm rocking the rose lights. That's right, they are rose-colored lights. Don't you ever say anything different. But anyway, going into what we have from Miss Nancy over at Deadline, Wakanda Forever leaps to $768 million globally. And it does point out that this film not only has been able to surpass that of Thor Love and Thunder, but is also very close to being able to pass up and become the 5th highest grossing film of the year, which would include this film crossing the Batman's numbers for 2022. So this film still doing very, very well for this given year. If we look at the individual numbers for the domestic, as you can see, it had a 37% drop from week 4 to week 5. So a pretty good number there. The film is still tracking ahead of where we saw Doctor Strange at the same point in its release. This weekend, it's actually caught up a little bit as well. Last weekend, I think the reason why you saw the numbers kind of correct themselves a little bit, the film was quite ahead after Thanksgiving because of Thanksgiving. The weekend after that, we saw a much bigger drop-off than some were expecting. Again, because it was no longer Thanksgiving and a lot of people had already gone to see it. Now we started to see the film normalize. And I think this is the kind of percentage that Disney wanted to see from this movie, because if this is the kind of number it's hitting before Avatar 2 comes out, where it'll be up against itself, I think that it's going to be in a position where maybe 50% of a drop or 60% of a drop in week 6 is a possibility. Who knows at this point? We don't know exactly how much money Avatar is going to make. We don't know how much of the market it is going to take up also. So whether Black Panther or any of the other films on this list are going to be majorly impacted by that or not is still up in the air. Regardless of that, we can still expect the film to continue to push forward and get to that number 5 spot for the highest grossing films of the year, coming in the number 5 highest grossing film of 2022, and also continuing to push itself closer to what I think will likely be an end result of around $800 million or so. And I'll explain how I got to that number in just a second. Going to the number 2 film, This weekend, we see the number 2, 1 through 5 actually spots all repeat themselves. So Violent Night came in the number 2 spot in the second week of its release, seeing a 35% hold. So very strong numbers there for this film. This film is well on its way to making its money back and making some profit. Strange World is not really seeing the same thing. Even though that 29% is not a terrible drop to have in a third week of release, it is still being pulled from theaters, 614 theaters in fact, and still costs so much money that the $30 million, yes, that's right, for a Walt Disney animated feature to only be at $30 million domestically in the third week of its release tells you a lot about the problems that Disney is having right now when it comes to their theatrical releases. The menu from Searchlight, so a subsidiary of Walt Disney, you have here coming in the number 4 spot, $2.7 million, a 22% hold. So this film is still crawling towards breaking even, hasn't quite gotten there yet, has the possibility to. I believe it's only about 10 million or so out from that point, so it still could theoretically happen if it continues to make a few $1,000,000 here and there over the next few weeks. But again, we'll have to wait and see by the end of it whether or not the film is able to get to that point or not for, again, smaller budget film and a smaller footprint film as well. I think that overall it's showing itself to be pretty strong. The fact that also this movie, a Searchlight film, so again, an independent film, is at 29 million domestic versus the $30 million of Strange World. I don't know. I think it's interesting that you could see the menu have a higher domestic total at the end of its run than a Disney animated film. I think that speaks a lot more to how bad Strange World is / the bigger problem that Disney has overall with being able to get their audiences and the kids and the families to show up for their movies than anything else, but it is an interesting metric nonetheless. Another interesting metric is from Sony, Devotion, coming in at a 27% drop in its third week of its release, adding some theaters actually, but still ultimately not likely going to be enough at $16.9 million domestically, with the film costing $90 million total. This film is set to be a massive financial flop, probably losing close to $100 million when all is said and done. I've heard good things about it, but ultimately, if you don't get good word of mouth to such a level, right, if you don't get good word of mouth, and especially if you don't get good marketing, then you can only ever do so much. Black Adam continuing to also be in the top 10, coming up a spot this week, making $1.3 million, a 14% drop. And even though Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is claiming the film is a box office success, I'm here to tell him nay, nay. I'm here to set the record straight on that. And again, shout out to Valiant Renegade, another box office breakdown channel, among other things on the channel. Shout out to him because he also was very quick to call out Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on his attempt to try to make it seem like his film was a box office hit, when in reality, it is not. We may not agree on everything when it comes to methodology, but shout out to Valiant Renegade for especially him calling out of the Black Adam nonsense because, yeah, the film is a flop. The Fableman's continuing to hang around as well with a 7% hold between its week 4 and week 5. But again, it's just having one of those weird releases, so hard for me to really track. I Heard the Bells Fathom event still also hanging out around as well. Spoiler alert, also a very small release film, so hard to track. Ticket to Paradise, $600,000. Was able to see this film and have a review up on the channel. Overall, it's a fair, inoffensive rom-com, but ultimately it's two very rich people getting to go on a holiday while shooting a movie. That's how it comes across, so pick your poison, I guess, with that one. The film about, that's right, the Bones and All, the film about cannibals and cannibal love, that one's still hanging out around as well. Top Gun Maverick is also still in the picture because this film got a re-release, so still adding some thousands of dollars to its release, so not nearly the numbers it was making, but again, it's been out for physical media now for quite a while. The Whale finally starting to get a very small release. I'm actually very excited for this one to see Brendan Fraser's performance. I've been hearing nothing but great things about it. That film also is starting to get a release, so it'll be interesting to see. A24 is a little bit better, I feel like, when it comes to the slow release. It still drives me crazy, but I feel like they're better with that than anyone else because their films tend to be a bit on the smaller end. Now let's go back and talk about Black Panther, because the film crossing $767 million, that means that not only is it well past the $745 million of Thor: Love and Thunder, but it's also within about a day or so. In fact, actually looking at the numbers as they currently stand, it has passed the Batman. So actually, apologies, the film officially, according to these numbers, has passed the Batman. So it is now the 5th highest grossing film of 2022. So I suppose what they meant in that article from Deadline was that by the time they had gotten the numbers, they had not gotten the domestic or whatever it might have been, maybe the numbers hadn't been finalized yet. But ultimately, it looks like Wakanda Forever will have passed the Batman as of today. And likely when the actuals come in, will still be ahead of the Batman. And even if it isn't, guess what? over the next week, it will cross the Batman. And so I think that is something that is needing to be considered, because some people have gone and say, the Batman, hey, yeah, it actually did pretty well at the box office, or hey, the Batman didn't do bad. The Batman actually did pretty well. Okay, well, then you have to say something very similar about Black Panther Wakanda Forever, because guess what? The Batman had a $200 million budget. Black Panther Wakanda Forever had about a $250 million budget, so cost a little bit more. So the fact that the film, though, is making money still, whereas this was the end point of the release for the Batman, shows you why I think the film still has a little bit of room to run. Also, again, crossing that of Thor: Love and Thunder is, I think, a feat that is definitely impressive. Looking at the domestic numbers, you can see at $409.8 million, it is almost going to, within this next week, it's going to surpass that domestic total of Doctor Strange 2. So again, one of the reasons why I think that the film's domestic has still a little ways to go. If in the 6th week of its release, it's going to surpass a film's final number, which was out for about 10 weeks before eventually it got pulled. Thor: Love and Thunder, it's way ahead of, and it's also even ahead of the Batman's total domestic run as well. So very impressive numbers there. And it's really on pace even internationally, though not to get to the same numbers as Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, to be able to potentially catch up with Thor: Love and Thunder, and maybe even catch up with the Batman as well, which is the reason why we're going to see the film, I think, end somewhere between $800 and $850 million is if it continues to go ahead. The international numbers that were being broken down here over on Deadline.com said that it dropped internationally about 43%. And so I think that is something that is definitely worth mentioning and worth noting. It goes on here to talk about, again, just how much money the film has overall added. Right, the top 5 markets to date are 36.5, Mexico 34.1, 38.9 for France, 19.6. So those are the markets where it is, again, doing relatively well in those different locations. It added, again, $11.8 million in these markets, and so it dropped 48%. So if we see similar types of drop-offs, we can expect next weekend for it to add another $10 to $15 million when, domestic and international together. So if it continues on that path and continues to march forward, that is the reason why I think that those numbers, those endpoints for the international and domestic are, again, domestic somewhere between 450 and 500, I think. Internationally, somewhere between 375 and 400 million, if I had to guess, which would put this film over $800 million. And I think, again, 800 to 850 is probably the ceiling for the film at this point in time. But it is still, again, far cry from the $1.3 billion of that first Black Panther movie. And because of the change in ticket prices as well, we've also seen a massive loss in audience. So, yeah, this might be an individual success for the MCU, but the MCU as a whole has a lot of soul searching to do because they've lost a ton of people as far as general audiences are concerned. Violent Night is in a much better situation. Costing much less than those other films. $41.7 million is where this one currently is, and we'll talk about where that stands now that that's in the 2nd week of release. Strange World still $200 million in the red, looking like that's going to be a final number for this movie as it continues to add nothing, only at $53.4 million worldwide. It's actually even below the international numbers there, so look at that. Yeah, The Menu. That is an independent film, right? Put out by the independent arm. The Searchlight arm of Disney is doing better than Strange World, an animated feature from Disney. If you were to tell anyone that would ever happen, even within the past few years, they would have laughed at your face. And yet, hey, Disney was able to do that with bad marketing and also, of course, with trying to add woke identity politics into their films. The Menu, though, $57.7 million, still has a little ways to go to make its money back, but still doing well. Devotion, not so much, $13.7 million. Again, I don't quite understand the chart down here as far as what it's saying, because the film ultimately versus its budget is not in a very good situation. Black Adam as well, $388 million. Maybe it makes it to 400. It only added about 4 million overall from last week to this week. So that is going to continue to diminish, right? It's going to continue to become less and less over time. So maybe it squeezes out to $400 million in either case. It's still going to be far cry and far away from its break-even point, so still going to be a financial failure. Fabelmans, as I've mentioned before, don't know enough about, but here is the current numbers. Same thing with I Heard the Bells. Those are the numbers. Ticket to Paradise, $169.7 million. Again, it was fine. And for it to make just a bare amount of profit, sounds about right for this movie. Ah, yes, The Cannibals with Timothée Chalamet, for those that are interested. Top Gun Maverick, still, I think, one of the best films of the year, if not the best film of the year. So happy to see this film continue to be in the discussion as far as top films of the year. Really hope and pray that Avatar 2 ends up being seen for what it really is, the Avatar franchise really being seen for what it really is, which is just James Cameron's attempt to spend a lot of money telling you no story whatsoever, but giving you a lot of really pretty visuals to look at, which means giving you a bad movie that looks pretty and might do well at a Best Buy if it's the standard footage that's being shown on a TV to show you what a TV can do, but not a film that you should probably watch multiple times. At least that's what the first Avatar film was. Sounds like this is going to be the same, because the only good things that are being told about this movie are, hey, the CGI effects are amazing and groundbreaking. Oh yeah, the story's okay, at best. Some have even said that the story is worse than that of the first film. Doesn't give a lot of confidence to the general audience members. And then La La Crocodile, since I've been mentioning that almost every single week, still, again, crawling its way, but looks like the steam is just slowly running out for the movie. So who knows? Let's go ahead and go to the box office charting, because we like to do some charting here on the channel. For Violent Night, it is projected now, after the amount of money it's made, $41.7 million after 2 weeks, to make somewhere between $5.7 and $20 million in net gain profit. So right now it's only about $4.9 million in the red, so it'll easily be able to cross that and actually make a fair amount of profit to boot. We look at Strange World, again, continuing to be a massive disappointment. Right now, still at negative $273 million overall. And as I had projected last weekend during its second weekend, it will end well over $200 million in the red. Same with Devotion, ending well over $100 million in the red. That is not changing based off of the numbers that we are currently getting in. The menu's at $10.3 million in the red. So as you can see, it's actually tracking pretty well. It's getting ever closer to doubling what it did in the first 2 weeks of its release. If it's able to do that, then we could, again, potentially see this film be able to make some money. But it still has a little ways to go, so we'll see if it's able to survive the onslaught of the Avatar box office as that eventually comes out. She Said, that's right, the film set during the Me Too era, all about the Me Too era, still a financial flop. Glad to see it. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, $767 million, $85.6 million in the black. As you can see, it's just about to hit the bare minimum of what I had projected the film to do. So this film will indeed fall within the range I had given of around $779 to $1 billion. That was the total range I'd given for this movie. So this film will at the very least get to $779, which is the reason why I think the film getting to $800 million is very likely at this point in time. That falls very much within the range that I had given this film in the early days. And so since this film likely will fall into the 60s as of next weekend, I think that's the reason why $800 million, even potentially by next weekend, or very close to $800 million by next weekend, even with the competition from Avatar, is still a possibility if those numbers continue to hold. Now here's the Black Adam numbers, $66 million in the red. Yes, that's right. $66 million in the red. So still within the range that I had projected for this film, and still not a box office success. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, there's no word I can say that I would not immediately regret saying. You nincompoop. There we go. I'm going to stick with that one instead. But yes, stupid. Doesn't mean that the film's not going to get a sequel or anything like that, because Dwayne "Rock" Johnson has a lot of money. So I'm sure that if he wanted to, he could probably say, hey, studio, here's the money you lost. Let's go ahead and keep on making them. Maybe people will finally start to come. I have my doubts. $11 million in the black for Ticket to Paradise. La La Crocodile, still $22 million in the red. Amsterdam, which was a massive flop this year, is now available on HBO Max. Smile was able to add a little bit of extra money on as well, but still a massive $100 million gain for them. So very impressive numbers. I did mention this on my stream the other day. I was sent a review copy of The Woman King, so I will give you all my thoughts about that. That's the only way I would ever watch the film, is if I got sent a copy to review. And sure enough, they indeed chose me to receive a review copy. Cannot wait to give my thoughts about that film. Still only being $18.5 million in the red. Again, overall, when you look at the box office, it actually did, more impressive than what it probably should have done, but still far cry from the $100 million that it should have at least gotten, and still within the $18 million loss range there. So again, performing better than even my own expectations, but still not enough for them to be able to pull out any type of real money from the actual film itself. And then the last update that I had on this chart was the updated numbers because of the re-release of Top Gun Maverick, now $1.488 billion, putting its total at $638 million in net gain profits. So massive amounts of money from Paramount. Paramount likely going to be one of the highest grossing studios of this year when you look at the actual net gain profits, whereas Disney, Warner Brothers, likely going to be at the bottom of that food chain. But what are y'all's thoughts about these numbers? Are you surprised by them at all? What are your thoughts about Violent Night, Strange World, Devotion, any of those films, and the fact that Violent Night will make its money back, Strange World, Devotion being financial flops, and also your thoughts about Black Panther Wakanda Forever? Do you think that it's going to hit to $800 million? I think, again, $800 million is a bare minimum at this point. Somewhere between $8 and $850, I think, is the ceiling for the movie. We'll have to, of course, wait and see. Anyone who's still trying to say the film has a chance at $1 billion is just not paying attention to the actual numbers as they stand. And also, what else thoughts about Avatar 2 coming out next weekend? Do you think that film is going to be a massive financial hit. Again, even though I don't want the film to do well, I think it will. If it flops, I'll be so happy, but it won't. Again, it needs to make about $1 billion based off of the actual numbers being reported, not what James Cameron is claiming needs to be made by it. I think he's kind of bloviating, by the way. Someone appreciated that word the other day, so I will use it once again. But yeah, someone who was just bloviating, James Cameron tends to do that, right? I think he's kind of overselling his film. And based on the early reviews, it sounds like that probably will end up being the truth. But let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, like the fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button as well. Still have my November shoutouts video because today was just, let's say, it was a tough day with baby Thor. I brought him to Mass, and it's been a while since he's gone to Mass, and it was very hard to keep his attention. The daycare there, he didn't like because he had never been there before, so it was a strange place, so I had to go get him after the gospel. And then when I got home, one of the dogs had, gotten sick in her kennel, poor Willow. So I had to clean that. Yeah, let's just say lots of stuff has been going on, and so I do apologize for my scattered brain this video. And anyway, thank you again for all of your love and for your support. But because of that, I also have not been able to do my December video, as again, I'm looking baby Thor at the baby monitor down below. Hopefully he gets a full nap because it took him a while to fall asleep. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Shout out to Chris from the 80s, who's the only major change in the Patreon support that I had noticed. All the other levels were about the same. Again, that would not have changed the actual video itself. Some people might be getting an extra shout out when they shouldn't. But hey, that's okay. I'll give you this freebie this time. This week with exam week coming up, I should finally have time to actually start to do this and actually start to get the December video out. Hey, it only took me about halfway through the month to get to that point, but it'll happen. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful day, everybody. A blessed Gaudete Sunday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my November Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Patreon with Father Luca Illich. Thank you very much, Father. Garrett Searles, Jaimir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can check out on YouTube at his channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who also has a YouTube channel that you can check out at Eagle Writer, and Miss Martin Muses, who also has a YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Tina B, where she hosts the show with Stephanie B, one of my mods, and one of my Valkyrie, called Soup to Nuts. Check out Soup to Nuts, and it premieres pretty much every Friday. So again, shout out to all of my Patreon people, also to all my Subscribe Star people, starting off with Matt317. Check him out on Twitch at Matt317. The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. And ZK-Man you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co to follow him as he starts his podcast, and also for many of his musical musings as well. Check him out. Very, very talented guy. And then lastly, my locals peeps. We got Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan. How about a hockey player? UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win. J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer, Robert Barnes. Thank you all so very much for supporting me. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to special things like giveaways and also exclusive podcasts that I do with John the Flickpick Flickinger and other guests throughout the month of November and in the previous and the months to follow as well. And again, if any of that sounds interesting to you, especially the 4K giveaways, Steelbook giveaways, some of them that I have to give away this month are films like Starship Troopers on 4K Steelbook, Top Gun Maverick on 4K Steelbook, amongst many others. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the link and follow the instructions down below. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.